Nutrition Depot, your fitness fuel. We're back for Nutrition 101 Part 2 with Jo Sebastian. Hello.
Hey, we're back.
Yeah, back with more details and more information. This time we tackle calorie deficit, surplus, and sustainable diet.
Yeah. This is a hot topic.
This is a hot topic because usually when you hear diet, people have a certain goal, right?
Yes, exactly. It's like they're like, I want to go on a diet. But actually what they want is like, I want to lose weight. I want to lose fat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're looking for the best diet, but they're not sure yet what actually makes you lose weight or what actually makes you lose fat.
In the first episode, we were thinking like diet just means losing weight, but it's so many different things. It's just a way of eating, right?
Agree.
So how would a nutritionist explain the concept of a calorie deficit and a surplus?
Okay, so first we have to talk about calories, right? What are calories? They are a unit of energy. So they just measure how much energy you're going to get from a food item and how much energy your body needs to do certain tasks, right? So it's not a nutrient, it's just a measure of energy. So for example, okay, this apple has 80 calories. So I'm going to get 80 units of energy from this apple. Or for me to raise my arms up like this, it takes 1 calorie. So that's like how much energy I need for certain activities. Like it's that measurement, basically. So when we talk about calorie surplus or calorie deficit, we're essentially talking about how many calories you eat versus how many calories your body uses in a day. Okay? So a calorie deficit is essentially eating less than what you need in a day, and a calorie surplus is eating more than what you need in a day. Now, how does this all tie into fat loss or weight gain? So the analogy I like to use is a glass of water. Okay? So imagine there's a glass of water and then there's like a bowl underneath that. So that glass of water, that amount is how much energy you need in a day. So you'd fill it up, like all the way full, done. That's how much energy you need. If you overfill the glass, that's a calorie surplus. The excess will fall into the bowl outside, right? That is going to be your stored energy. And that's like your stored fat, basically, right? So excess calories is usually stored energy as either fat or sometimes even for your muscle. Now, on the opposite end, if you don't fill the cup all the way, let's say 3/4, that other fourth left, you still need that energy. So what will your body do? It's going to tap into your stored energy this time because you didn't have enough. So that's your calorie deficit. And that's how you mobilize your stored fats, is by creating a deficit so your body needs to tap into that stored energy.
I love that analogy because that simplifies it all.
Yes, exactly.
So the stored fat is what you use for the energy. If you're in a caloric deficit, that's
Correct.
how people lose weight.
Correct, yes. That's how we lose fat, basically. Yeah. But that's why if you do a calorie deficit that is too low, so there's also something we have to make sure you're doing the right amount of a deficit and the right amount of a surplus. Because if we're saying, okay, so I eat less than I need in a day, that's a deficit, that doesn't mean don't eat, right? Because then you do, okay, so if I want to tap into all my stored fat, I just won't eat, right? Like technically that happens, but you'd also now be tapping into stored energy in the form of muscles as well. So that's why we want to make sure that you have an appropriate deficit, an appropriate surplus.
For the calorie deficit, how do you maintain that calorie deficit? Is it just with food or can you move more to get that calorie deficit?
Usually when you compute your calorie needs, you already factor in your physical activity, right? So that means that it's common for people to think, okay, I worked out, so this means I can add an extra this much. If you already incorporated that computation, like, okay, my calorie needs for the week is this, for the day is this much, including my activity factor, then we shouldn't be adding the exercise on top of that anymore. Because technically your deficit already includes the exercise, right? So that it's not like added on, because then that also tends to create an earn and burn mentality around food, where it's like, okay, I deserve this because I did this last, or I have to work out another hour so that I can eat this cookie. Like it becomes like that, or like, no, just eat regularly. If you exercise a little bit more than usual, then maybe eat a little bit more, but we don't have to think too much about how much can I eat more because I worked out.
So you are yourself right now. Let's set the scene. I want to know my caloric deficit and surplus. first off, I need to calculate my maintenance. Is that where we begin?
Yes. So maintenance calories for every individual is very, very different. This depends on your height, your body composition, sometimes even genetic factors, your health concerns. There's actually so many different equations out there because it also depends on the individual. Like we compute for individuals who are amputated. That's a different calculation. If you have a specific metabolic concern, sometimes you'll also have a few factors here and there. So it's really different. But basically, yes, you compute it using information like your height, weight, and age, or sometimes just your weight is already enough information for that. And then you'll get your maintenance. Basically, this is how much you eat every day to maintain your same weight, same body composition. Well, not necessarily dependent, but basically the same weight. You'll maintain that because you're just using the energy that you consume. So that's your maintenance. Let's say 2,000 for somebody. For a deficit, you would go anywhere minusing 100 to 500 calories.
So it doesn't have to be 50% of what your maintenance.
No.
That's what you see sometimes,
Yeah.
right? To get the result fast, you cut it off immediately, half of what you need.
Exactly. I mean, that works, but it's not healthy. It's not sustainable. It's not necessary.
1 to 500 pala.
Yes. So usually you would go with 500. It's like, okay, we have a little bit more calories that we can work with. We can go a little bit more to that 500. But if you're already, let's say, in a very low calorie maintenance, then you don't want to be taking out 500 calories extra from that. So we'll go slower with that. Personally, I like to kind of go to a 200 to 300 calorie just because it's conservative, but also mostly more sustainable for like long-term deficit as well.
How I know that.
Oh, wait, the surplus. I forgot
go
about
ahead.
And then on the other hand, with the surplus, you would add now anywhere between 100 to 500 calories as well.
I like the surplus. That's more fun.
I love that one.
I love that one. That was my favorite.
Oh, but I do want to emphasize, like, surpluses are not just so that you gain weight necessarily.
Yeah.
Surpluses are also done for, like, you want to gain muscle, because technically you gain weight, but then you're gaining muscle, right? Because most people are afraid of, like, oh, surplus, that's so bad. But some people who maybe want to grow their butts or maybe want to build some muscle, sometimes a surplus is actually something that you might want to incorporate because that will help you build your muscles easier.
Yeah. Or if you're training for a marathon, training for something big, right? You have to eat a lot to fuel your body.
Exactly.
I know calories are different from nutrition, which you mentioned earlier. How can you effectively achieve a caloric deficit without compromising the nutritional needs?
Okay. Well, first you have to make sure that you are at the right deficit. That's very important because more likely if you are doing a deficit that is too big, like you're cutting on 1,000 calories or anything like that, it's going to be so much harder for you to get your nutrient needs in. So that's number one. Make sure you have the right deficit. And then number two, we just follow our balance plate, our Pinggang Pinoy, that shows us to, as much as possible, fill at least 1/4 of your plate with carbs, 1/4 with protein, 1/2 with your fruits and vegetables, just so that you can also make sure you're getting as many nutrients as possible. If you are calculating or logging in your calories, you can also take note of the other nutritional information that's usually there. Like check in with how much vitamins
Read the back of the...
your carbs, like your protein, like check in with those as well. Because sometimes we're only thinking about calories, but it's also important to remember calories are not the only thing that matter as well.
The quality also matters of the food that you're eating, like the macronutrients of it all.
Yes, that's why sometimes we're thinking, okay, low calorie is better, right? And like we're just thinking that. But a lot of low calorie foods don't supply you with the protein that you need or the carbohydrates that you need. So it's not always low calorie bad, high calorie good. It's also just looking at that overall nutrient needs that you might have.
What are the signs that indicate that someone may be in a caloric surplus?
Okay, so this would usually happen over time. This isn't like a one day and you already know, like, okay, I'm in a calorie surplus.
Yeah.
Unless you're familiar with your usual intake. But essentially, if you start to gain some weight over time, also if you don't move much, it could also be feeling more sluggish as well. Maybe your hunger levels change or there's a shift in your hunger cues. Those could be some indications for us that, okay, maybe we're at a calorie surplus. But usually it would be more of that, are you storing more energy? Then that would probably indicate you're in a surplus.
I like that. And it changes throughout your life, right?
Yeah.
Does it affect with age and activity or?
Activity, definitely, yes. Age, in a sense, because of body composition. So a lot of individuals, well, all of us usually think, when I get older, my metabolism slows down. It does to a degree, but actually it's not a major difference. The major shift is when you lose a lot of muscle. Yeah, so when you lose a lot of muscle, your metabolism really does slow down. And since a lot of us, as we age, we move less. So that's really the tendency. So that's why our goal is build your muscle as much as you can while you're younger. Try to maintain it as much as you can so that you can also maintain your metabolic health.
This is why strength training is king.
Yes.
I love that.
It's not just for the booty. It's also for your health.
For your health, for bone density.
Exactly.
So when you build more muscle, you burn more fat while you're resting.
Yes. It's not like a major difference. Because I don't think it's like, oh, do I get more, like 1,000 extra calories? So it's not like super different. But let's say one gram of muscle and 1 gram of fat at rest, you would have more energy or need more energy to maintain muscle. So it's an active tissue, basically. So like, let's just call it I'm a hyper person, like that. You need to feed me more. Like that's your muscle, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stay active, everybody. That's all I'm learning today. How important it is in moderation, variety, and balance in a healthy diet.
Definitely, those are our key concepts when it comes to a healthy diet, because it's very difficult to like tell somebody like what you should eat and things like that. That's why we focus on our core concepts instead. It simplifies everything. Balance tells you need carbs, fats, protein, fiber. It doesn't have to be only carbs or only protein. We can have a balance. Variety impacts your nutrient availability, where the more variety of food you have, the more nutrients you get. Also, you also get more gut diversity when you have more variety in your food as well. And then moderation reminds us that while there are no good and bad foods, we still have to be mindful of our overall consumption, because we can overdo something or underdo something. And moderation reminds us to learn how to listen to that part of our body that tells us when something is too much or when we need something else.
Actually, I wanted to ask, I know that a lot of us, me included, in the past, I was on a caloric deficit for like a year because I didn't reach my goal weight yet. Is there a limit? Yeah, I can push it, but I've learned from it and I've learned to take diet breaks. How long should I be in a caloric deficit or a caloric surplus until I take it to maintenance? Or do I even need to, or can I just keep going?
So usually, like when you start out and you've never done like a deficit, you can probably do it a little bit longer, right? But if you've been doing a deficit for a long time and you're not seeing what you need to do, that's probably when we should really take a diet break. Personally, for me, I would go at like 6 weeks to 2 months of a deficit before going back to maintenance, just to, as much as possible, not stress your body out. Because you have to remember, going on a calorie deficit is restrictive in a sense that you are eating less than what your body needs, right? You have to know that that's something you're putting your body through. And that's not something your body likes.
It's stressful, literally.
Yeah. Mentally and physically.
Yeah.
So that's kind of that thing that you have to remember. You can give your body breaks just because it does need that time to be like getting enough nutrients and getting enough fuel in again. Not necessarily resetting, but in a sense, kind of like bringing you back up to like, wait, okay, ready, let's go again. So for me, I would prefer like a 6 to 2 month like strategy here. But as long as you are not feeling too hungry anymore, you're not losing a lot of energy, losing hair, or seeing all these adverse effects that usually happens when you prolong a calorie restriction, then those are some things that could indicate, okay, we can keep going until we see a sign that's like, we should take a step back.
Listen to your physical and hunger cues as well to make it more sustainable for you.
Exactly.
Now, we talk about caloric deficit and surplus, but what if it's hard for me going through like different restaurants here in the Philippines? We don't have the access to knowing what our calories are in our food. should we be like counting our macros, bringing a scale? Is there an easier way to achieve that surplus or deficit without knowing or counting or weighing everywhere I go?
Okay, well, weighing can be helpful for some people who do it. It's perfectly fine if you like it. But you also have to remember when you get too obsessed to that point where it's like you cannot eat unless you don't weigh it, then that's something you have to reassess. Okay, maybe we have to take those steps backwards in that. But we usually will look more on portion management as well. So sometimes we have like the hand guide that can tell us a little bit of information.
Teach me.
So usually have like a fist, what is called a closed fist would be like a cup of rice or carbohydrates, something like that. These are estimates, of course, but it kind of gives us a little bit of like a visual representation. Sometimes you'd look at like your palm as like your protein guide, and then something as like hands cupped. I don't know if I'm describing this correctly. So like 2 hands cupped as like your veggies, or something like maybe like this much, like your palm. Or you can also do the plate method again. Try to start off with 1/4, 1/4, 1/2 carbs, protein, and fiber.
1/4, 1. Okay.
And then like you can play around with that from there. So usually for me, when I have clients who want to go on a calorie deficit but don't want to count, the first thing we do is you have to create your baseline first. So I'd essentially say, okay, how much do you usually eat without changing anything? What does that look like for you in a week? Okay, like that. And then just do that. Okay, what happened after that week? You maintained your weight. So that is technically your maintenance. Now we just have to find something somewhere to shift and create that deficit. So maybe that is doing half sandwich instead of a full sandwich with our snack. Maybe that's doing 3/4 cup of rice rather than a full cup of rice. That can also be kind of a guide as well. I think that's one way to see it. You start with your baseline and then work from there.
I like that. So you have like a little food diary or notes in your phone. And then if you maintain that weight, you can just change it up a little bit at a time per week and then see if that results into something.
If you don't want to track calories, because it's not for everyone, although it can be helpful.
Yeah.
But, there are other ways as well to try to achieve that without getting too into the numbers.
Yeah. I got a little bit obsessed too.
We've been there.
We've all been there. I'm telling you, it's a canon event. That's why now we have a podcast to educate each other on how to be better at all of this.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people still say and comment online, caloric deficit, but it doesn't work. Caloric deficit doesn't work. But sometimes that means you're not in your caloric deficit.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah. So that is usually what you would see. Like, calorie deficit doesn't work. A calorie deficit is not a diet. Like, the other way, it's not a diet. It is thermodynamic. Is that? I forget what it's called. It's the science. It is the science of how your body utilizes energy.
Yeah.
Like how heat is produced and all of those things. No matter what diet you go on, it's only going to result in fat loss or muscle gain when there is a calorie surplus or deficit. And most diets that we see online create a calorie deficit whether you know it or not.
Exactly.
Right? Because you're like, cut out carbs. Okay, deficit. Because you're not eating that whole food group. Or let's say only have bone broth. Deficit. Because you're not eating anything.
Yeah, it's not because the bone broth is magical.
Yes.
It's because you're not eating enough calories or you're in a deficit.
Yes, you've created a calorie deficit whether you tracked or not. Right? So that's always important to remember. However, everybody's deficit is different. That's the thing that we look at. Because some people might think, oh, that person's eating 1/6 calories as their deficit, I'll eat that too. And then it's a completely different result because everyone has a very different computation, which is very important to remember. Everyone's calorie maintenance is very different. Now, there are certain situations where your health situation, metabolism, hormonal balance impacts how your body creates a deficit. So that would be, for example, if you have something like PCOS,
The nuance.
hypothyroidism, for example, that now changes your metabolism or how your body responds to calories, not necessarily in a very different way, but it shifts it in the sense that maybe what a deficit would be for someone else or for you before is no longer that. And maybe there's something that has to be addressed first before you can go on your calorie deficit, because there are things that are going on that like that are a little bit more complicated.
You brought up PCOS, and since we're both girls here, we go through a different cycle. Like a different cycle. We have our PMS, we have our period, luteal, yada, yada, yada. Should my diet change with that? Do I get a little bit more leeway? Can I eat more calories when I'm PMSing or on my menstrual cycle?
Okay, great question. I actually love this question because it's not talked about enough.
Yeah.
Mostly because also males tend to take up a lot of the fitness space. What about us? Yeah. But so your period usually goes into two main phases. So your follicular phase is from day 1 of bleeding until I think it's like day 14, like day 1 to day 14. And then day 14 to 28 is usually your luteal phase. And this is essentially where your body is preparing to create an egg, right? Because that's why we bleed, because we're creating eggs. And then you also have your like ovulation as well there, right? So during the luteal phase, certain aspects of your body's hormonal balance actually increases your metabolism anywhere from 7 to 10%, or around 100 to 300 calories.
That means you burn more.
Yes.
What?
Of course, the range is different for everyone.
Yeah.
But it usually leads to your metabolism going up a bit. And that's why you'd probably feel a lot hungrier during that time you're about to bleed, or the PMS stage, pre-menstrual, pre-bleeding, because your body has basically increased its metabolism. Another aspect is serotonin is lower during your luteal phase. And serotonin is that relaxation hormone we love. Tryptophan is an amino acid in carbs that is converted into serotonin. So that's also one of the reasons why we're like, we kind of want
Cookies, cakes, rice. So that's why you're craving more carbs.
Yes, one of those reasons is you're burning more. The other one is possibly because you have a lower serotonin. And then another one would also be maybe you're not feeling very comfortable in your body and you just need some comfort food. Right? So all of these things come into play. And that's why it's important to know your body and know your cycle. So you also know how to work with it through your goals.
No, we don't talk about it enough. And we go through it every month. And since I was a teenager, diba? But every month we're still surprised. Why am I so hungry? Why am I so sad? Diba? So we have to find these patterns or triggers that make us feel this way.
Yes.
And be kinder to ourselves. It's okay to eat a little bit more at that time then.
Like now you understand, like, oh, I see. I can't have that extra little piece of bread because I wanted it, and that gives me a little bit of an understanding why I wanted it as well, right? Your body is actually such a great communicator. It's just most of the time
We just have to listen.
yeah, most of the time we're told not to listen.
Yeah.
Told that the answer is this or that, but
Yeah.
it's actually just trying to figure it out as well.
I like it. Okay, now I won't feel bad about it either.
Yeah,
Diba?
you're gonna bleed, like, come on.
Yeah, our body's working overtime. Okay, our body's working overtime. But how can you build that healthy relationship with food, manage those cravings sometimes, and avoid emotional eating? This is just in a general aspect.
Okay,
Come on.
not in the calorie deficit aspect.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first, like, we always talk about your relationship with food. You have to understand what your relationship with food was like as you grew up. I think this is something we tend to not talk about enough, but it's so important. Because, for example, for Filipinos, food is such a big part of the family. Gatherings and all of that. For me, my rocky relationship with food started with a body comment. It's like, oh, your stomach is too big. And I was like, that's put me into all of those diets. So you first have to recognize everything that led you to where you are at now. Right? Because it's not just an overnight thing that was like, oh, you just have no discipline. You just have no willpower. No, there's probably so many other things that happened to get to where you are now. So you have to kind of work through and figure out what those things are so that you know what you have to address, right? If it's, let's say, body image related, then we have to work on our body image. If it's food scarcity related, where you had food insecurity when you were younger, didn't have much access to food, and now you have a food abundance and you don't really know how to deal with that, that's also something that you have to work through a little bit, right? So first assess that. And then when we talk about emotional eating, the first thing I usually tell my clients is, emotional eating is not bad because there are way worse ways to cope with your emotions than eating.
Yes.
There are a lot more dangerous things.
I thought you were going to name a few.
There's just a lot more dangerous things. So if eating is one of those things, like, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's okay. And plus it's usually an accessible thing.
Yeah.
Now the problem is when food is your only coping mechanism, you have nothing else to rely on, and food is the only thing now. And now you're treating it as a numbing tool and you never address the main problem. Or you go into the second layer of emotional eating. So your first layer of emotional eating is, I'm stressed, so I'm going to eat. So that's like level 1. Level 2 is, now I'm stressed that I ate, so I'm going to eat
Full trickle down.
Yeah. Like the guilt is no longer, the guilt is there and overtakes that main emotion. So now you're just eating because you feel like you shouldn't have eaten. You feel bad.
You feel bad and you find comfort in eating.
Yeah. And then you feel bad about having comfort in eating. So you
eat it more.
And then it just keeps going.
Yeah,
It doesn't
yeah.
end, yeah. So that's one of the things you have to remember is you're allowed to eat when you're stressed. That is okay. You don't have to feel guilty about it. But make sure you also diversify your coping mechanisms because there are other ways to feel relaxed. There are other ways to find comfort. So like, why are you reaching for food in the first place, right? For me, I tend to reach for food when I'm lonely because I need a companion. And food becomes like that companion. Like, we're having a little bonding.
That's why we call it comfort food.
Exactly. Right?
Yeah.
You're having that bonding, and that's fine. But also have other tools in your toolbox, your emotional toolbox, that help give you that. So what are other things that help give me that companion feeling? A song, like my favorite song, my favorite episode of a show,
Seeing friends.
yes, journaling,
Tennis.
yes. You know, so those are some of those things where it's like, okay, these are other things that give me what I'm looking for. I can reach for those. And if I do want food, that's also okay. I just have to allow myself to have it so I don't fight it.
A nap.
Yeah, we're still going.
We're still going on and on and on.
But exactly, because you have to look for those different tools.
I love that. We actually talked more about that in the first episode, like with binge eating. So if you haven't seen that yet, do check it out. Following the PMS and emotional eating, it's also maybe a good way to schedule your diet breaks.
Oh, yeah.
Within your cycle. No.
Yeah, that's also a possibility where you're like, okay, I'm probably going to be hungrier at this time. So I'll probably just plan to eat a little bit more just to anticipate as well the extra hunger I'm going to feel.
Yeah. How do I get to the road of intuitive eating, listening to my body and exactly what it needs?
Ooh, that's a long...
That's a journey.
Yeah, that's a
journey.
long conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So intuitive eating is technically, it's just eating. But because we have way too many diets out there, now you have to put a label on it, right? Intuitive eating is how we were when we were babies. You would cry if you were hungry. You would latch on, latch off when you're full. Like, you have that in you. It's just something that we've, over time, been taught to ignore. When you're told not to eat this, not to eat that, when you're told this is bad. So you're ignoring your own cues, right? And apart from that, over time, when you keep ignoring your cues are not regulated as well. Like, it stops. It's kind of like, okay, you're not going to listen to me when I say you're hungry. I'm not going to tell you when you're hungry.
Yeah.
It's like,
nagtampo.
like, no. Like, something happened.
You don't even listen to me. Yeah.
Fine. I told you. But that tends to happen because I dieted for so long. And then to the point where I never knew when I was hungry. I either never felt hungry or always felt hungry. And I was always like, why is my body like this? My body sucks. And then I realized it was because for a long time I wasn't really working with it. I was working against it. So intuitive eating is talking about how you can work with your body, like over time, listening to those cues, knowing what you need. So a sample of intuitive eating would be if you eat a lot of chips, you're going to want water. Right? That's your body's way of communicating with you that, oh, wait, we have a little bit too much sodium. We kind of have to balance that off with a little bit of water and fluid. So those are a lot of the signals that your body tends to send you, but we tend to override it. Yeah, you're like, oh, I ate too much chips. Well, I'm already bad today, so I'm just going to eat everything instead of kind of assessing, wait, that was too much. Next time I'm going to be a bit more mindful with that. We tend to go the other route of that. And intuitive eating teaches us again how to listen to those cues, how to understand it. It's not just eat when hungry, stop when full. It's also why am I hungry and what makes me feel satisfied with my meals.
I have a friend that can't distinguish what her physical hunger cues are. What are those cues that make us need to eat a little bit more?
Okay. So it's actually quite common to also misinterpret your physical hunger cues because we don't know it anymore. And most of the time we think that the only time you should eat is when you're super duper hungry. Like the acid.
Yeah. It's crumbling already.
That's already too hungry, basically. So some signs of physical hunger first, we'll put like leveling it out. In your head, that is you're thinking about food. So actually thinking about food is a sign that you're hungry. Most of it, like, not when like we're scrolling or like, oh, okay, that's some food there. But like when you're starting to have a hard time focusing, right? You're like, I want to eat something. Might be a sign that you're hungry. You're kind of feeling a little bit of like that brain fog. Also tends to be a sign of hunger. Moving it down to your stomach. It's that empty feeling, a little bit kind of growling, but not too much. And then moving it to your mood, getting irritable. You're starting to snap a little bit more. So those are some of those signs that when they are in the extreme end, they feel extreme. But then when it's the early signs of hunger, it's a slight drop of energy, that slowly thinking about food, a little bit of that empty feeling, that's when you should eat. Don't wait for it to get to
the worst levels.
because then it's harder to satisfy.
That's when overeating and binging, if you don't eat for a while, happens.
Yes, the tendency is like that. Like if you're stuck in traffic and then you get home really late and then now you're like eating everything because you're so hungry. Like that's an example of how getting too hungry usually leads you to get too full.
What are the best dietary patterns for improving health and managing weight? I also wanted to ask, is it true that I have to eat 3 meals a day?
So technically, no, because everybody is different. Although that's our baseline. It's usually our baseline because it's well spread out enough to your day that it's going to make sure you're eating like enough, right? But there isn't like a checklist of like, I have to eat this many meals a day. It depends. Of course, we have recommendations for specific settings. Like if you have acid reflux, small frequent feeding is the key. Even when it comes to like blood sugar management as well, athletes will probably need to eat more frequently to get enough food in general. So those are some of the things that we look at. But generally, it would be focused more on what fits your schedule and what helps you feel your best and energized as well. But there is this aspect to intuitive eating, because when you say eat when hungry, stop when full, what if I never feel hungry? Right, so I'm just never going to eat. There's a part of intuitive eating that talks about practical hunger, which is you're not going to feel hungry, or you also know that your body doesn't know how to tell when it's hungry yet. So you still eat regularly until your body can kind of create those cues again, right? That's why usually for me, I'm like, okay, let's just create a good meal pattern first. Eating even just a little bit if you're not hungry, so your body can finally regulate again. And then it can start sending those regular cues.
It's like healing your body.
Essentially,
And your mind. No, diet is such a difficult thing to talk about. You know, even you as a dietitian, there's a lot of intricacies and nuances that come with it. There's also a lot of emotions that come towards it.
The biggest factor.
I'm sure we can do another episode later on about that, because I think a lot of people can relate, with like the emotions and the cues that go along with it. I wanted to ask, what are the practical tips for individuals to stay motivated and consistent in their efforts to maintain a healthy diet and lifestyle?
Okay. So there's maybe 3 mindsets that we can focus on. Number 1 is to add nutrients rather than restrict.
Love that.
This is because we want to focus on addition rather than deprivation, right? Because when you're told not to eat something, you're going to want it more. And it's also hard to work in negative habits, because essentially you're working on a negative habit, right? It's like you're thinking, okay, stop eating rice. And then you're like, okay, then what? Like, But if you say, eat more veggies, that's going to give you a positive habit, a positive goal to work on. And now you're just thinking of what you can do rather than what you can't do. So that's 1. Number 2, focus on curiosity rather than judgment. So judgment would be, oh, I ate this whole pizza. I suck. I'm such a loser.
I feel heavy.
Like you're
blood
getting mad at yourself. You're getting in your head about it. Curiosity would be like, what led me to eat this whole box of pizza and letting me feel uncomfortable, right? Because now you're going to go through your day and be like, oh, I missed a meal. Or, oh, I'm stressed.
I barely slept today.
Exactly. Or I was stuck in traffic and I was so irritated. Like I just needed some comfort, right? When you're judgmental, that's it. That's it. Like do better next time. Like that's what happens. But if you're curious, you have a solution. Like you're able to work on how to address it in the future.
Yeah.
And then the third one is going to be hard for a lot of people. Be patient. It's like,
it takes time.
It's not easy. But be patient and work with what you have.
Yeah.
Okay, so don't try to follow someone else's diet. Maybe take some things from there, but you don't have to follow it strictly because you have to work with what you have. If your usual available food is, let's say, canned goods because that's what's accessible to you, maybe those are the things that you can keep in your house because you don't have a ref, right? There's so many things like that. What can you do with what you have? Like just work with that and be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself in that journey.
I'm learning so much. It feels like therapy. Thank you so much, Jo, for the 2 episodes that we have. I feel like we need more episodes. I still want to talk. I want to learn more. I want to learn more about this one. That curiosity one really hit me hard. Because eventually when you mess up your diet, you already tell yourself, like, why am I not disciplined? Why did I do this to myself? I ruined everything. Yeah. But you have to ask yourself now, am I PMSing? Am I tired? Am I sleepy? Am I hungry? Am
I giving myself the space to do all these things, right? Because sometimes it's actually all of those little things that are adding up. Yeah.
It's really a process. So thank you so much, Jo. Yes. How can we follow you online?
You can follow me at It's Jo Sebastian. That is on TikTok, on Instagram, and on Facebook. Also, I have a YouTube channel, and you can also listen to the Donut Box podcast on Spotify as well.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Nutrition Depot Podcast, Nutrition 101 with Jo Sebastian. And remember, you always deserve to eat. Nutrition Depot, your fitness fuel.